To these local business discounts, contact Jennifer at 909-889-8377, extension 224. Give her a call. That number again is 909-889-8377, extension 224.
Are you underpaid and overworked? Is a living wage and employee benefits like affordable health care more of a dream than a reality for you and your family? If so, it's time to form a union. Don't be denied the wages and benefits you deserve. Come together in a union with the power of numbers. A union is not a privilege, it's your right, and it will make a difference. Contact Teamsters Local 1932, a powerful and successful labor union in San Bernardino, by visiting Teamsters1932.org/organize to start today. Labor unions built the middle class, and the middle class built America. That's the message from Teamsters Local 1932, a strong and successful labor union based in San Bernardino that represents over 14,000 hardworking people across the Inland Empire. The Teamsters are ready to help you organize for better pay, increased benefits, and improved working conditions. Reach out to Teamsters 1932 at Teamsters1932.org/organize to speak with an organizer today.
Located in the heart of San Bernardino, California, the Teamsters Local 1932 Training Center is designed to train workers for high-demand, good-paying jobs in various industries throughout the Inland Empire. If you want a pathway to a high-paying job and the respect that comes with a union contract, visit 1932trainingcenter.org to enroll today. That's 1932trainingcenter.org.
Key permit for the controversial proposed Mountain Valley Pipeline to run through a section of the Jefferson National Forest in West Virginia. That part of an agreement last year to secure the vote of conservative Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia to pass Biden's landmark climate law, the Inflation Reduction Act. But some good news. The Biden administration announced nearly $11 billion in grants and loans to help rural energy and utility providers deploy renewable energy in rural communities using funds from the Inflation Reduction Act. It's the single largest investment in the rural electric grid since President Franklin Roosevelt's 1936 Rural Electrification Act. Finally, wind energy has generated more electricity than natural gas for the first time in the UK. A new analysis confirms that over the first 3 months of the year, more than 40% of the UK's electricity was generated by clean, renewable wind and solar, with only a third coming from fossil fuels like gas and coal.
Well, remember,
drill, baby, drill.
For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So over the weekend, I had this interesting conversation. Red Hat explaining to me that the Trump tax cuts didn't actually go to billionaires. Instead, his premise was it went to corporations with the sole intent of increasing production to bring down inflation. Now, again, this is one of those cute little stories of you start with your conclusion, and then you kind of wander your way back to the beginning. Because if you remember, when they did these massive tax cuts, inflation was already really low. Coming out of the Obama administration, inflation was low. The economy was doing pretty well. This was supposed to heat up the economy. Didn't really do what it was supposed to. Did make some rich people richer. But here to share some thoughts on this idea of cutting taxes to increase production to lower inflation. If that calculus works, and if that's the reality at this moment, I've asked my good friend Mateus Fernango to come talk with us. Mateus is an economics professor over at Bucknell University. He also does the Naked Canes blog. You want to check that out. Mateus, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Rick.
So you're the smart guy here. You're the one who's gonna give me all of the economic stuff. Does this make sense? This idea
Not at
that
all.
Trump specifically cut those taxes to give the businesses to increase production to lower inflation. That seems wrong.
It has nothing to do with that. It never had. It wasn't the reason they did the taxes. As you said, inflation was low, has been low for like 40 years before, early 2021. So the tax cuts didn't come at a time that inflation was high. Inflation has not been high since the early 80s. And besides, and this is incredibly tiresome because the jury is out on this. There is no discussion. The economics profession has no doubt. People from any sort of political spectrum will tell you tax cuts have no significant effect on growth. If you look at the incentives associated to growth and corporations have not paid off. We are not growing fast because of the reduction of marginal tax rates for individuals or for corporations. Income inequality has increased. There is no doubt about that. We living in a society that is as unequal as it was before the Great Depression, before what we call, the Great Contraction that happened in the late 30s and the 40s with the war and the GI Bill and all of those other things that created a middle class. So the high taxes of that communist Eisenhower actually did lead to an economy that was growing, that wages were higher, that we were doing all society as a whole better off. These tax cuts have nothing to do with that. They don't deliver on growth. They don't deliver on inflation because they had nothing to do with inflation. In fact, inflation did accelerate for reasons that had nothing to do with the tax cuts, because it's not because the economy accelerated and grew more, because we didn't. It was in the middle of a pandemic when the economy was tanking, and it was because of the supply problems that we had, and many other issues. Some corporations may have taken benefit of the things that happened during the pandemic and so on and so forth. So the notion that this was at the end of the day about inflation, it's preposterous. It's somewhat insulting. I understand that many people repeat that because they've been listening to Fox News. Fox News, of course, now we know they confess that they say whatever it's needed in order to sell to their audience whatever they think they have to sell. But the notion that this is serious economic thinking it's really preposterous.
No, it is, and you're spot on. But this comes back to this idea of actually having real conversations of how we move this economy forward. Because look, we gave away trillions of dollars in wealth over the last 40 years to the very well-to-do, and the pandemic just accelerated that. I saw a thing the other day that said, the billionaires in this country, through the pandemic, almost $3.9 trillion increase in wealth. And I saw another headline that said the working class of this country lost about $3.7 trillion in wealth. And you go, how did that happen? Well, this is how it happens.
It's taxes. It's the poisonous sort of policies towards labor, so that have led to the decline in unionization. So notions that have been sold as the idea that unions hurt the economy, whereas unions and higher wages clearly help the economy, and it's obvious why they do. They do because people that are happy, have good jobs, that they have the ability to work and be efficient because they're secure in their jobs and they get an actually good salary. They can go and buy stuff and get the economy moving. So that's the crazy secret of the golden age of the 50s and 60s, that we paid actually decent salaries to decent wages to workers, and that wages went up with productivity. So they did better jobs, they got better wages. It's an old idea, by the way, and it's an idea that we often, when we teach economics, we refer to efficiency wages as something that Henry Ford did. So he supposedly pay higher wages because he expects more efficiency, and he wanted them to buy the Model Ts. So it's not a crazy idea. So the notion that giving more money to corporations and squeezing wages would be a strategy for growth is insane. It has clearly, I mean, it's in the evidence. There is no doubt in the evidence that we have done poorly over the last 40, 50 years even. So going back to the 50s, that has nothing to do with inflation. It has nothing to do. It has a lot to do, I should say, with the question of how we're going to continue to spend money. So, are we going to continue to cut taxes for the wealthy, or are we going to expand expenditures on certain programs that, first of all, revitalizing industry in this country, spending more on certain things that will create good jobs, jobs that, are high paying union jobs, for example. And, can we still continue to do those things? And, this is what we're in the middle of with the, debates on the debt ceiling and so on and so forth.
No, get the
So
hammers
it's
and
a political issue.
the pitchforks, and the torches, and burn neoliberalism to the ground, and be done with it, and undo the damage that it
Oh,
caused.
yeah.
To me, that's a start.
It would be a start. I mean, I'm sorry to say that all of this is political. So there is a lot of stuff that, and the economics profession has played a role. So there are few economists that are willing to, very much like Fox News, being hired guns for conservative people saying absolutely, part of my French, idiotic things. There's no better word for this. They're idiotic. That makes no sense. The notion that this kind of stuff that hurts, the average person in the economy, they are, hurts workers, would be good for the economy as a whole is insane. In no place it has worked. So it's as simple as that.
But when they focus group test it and they think tank approve it, it tells a nice story that if we give the job creators all the money, that they'll bestow their benevolence will trickle down to us. We'll all be able to support our family. It's going to be great. It's utopia. Only the problem is the insatiable appetite for more by the folks at the very top never ceases, and their pockets never fill, and nothing ever spills out. And we end up with a billionaire class that pays virtually no taxes and does very little. And the working class continues to work longer and harder for less and less. And we're in this political moment, because you said it a second ago. All of this stuff that we've done, it's political. Policies got us here. Bad policies got us here. We can change this, though.
We can. I'll say that the interesting thing, we talked before about this in the program, and it's an interesting and I think cultural phenomenon in the U.S. There is this sort of notion, at least in part of the working class, that has the very wealthy have been able to divide working class in the U.S. And in part of that is this notion that I think I told you that the sort of surprise to me about the story of Joe the plumber. I always love that story. The guy that wasn't a plumber, and didn't have a business, and and it took me a while to understand that. And I said, oh, he's afraid of the taxes that they will charge on his future business that he doesn't have. So it's this notion that he will be the billionaire. So everybody is in the sort of American dream is not really that you're going to be a billionaire. It's that you're going to be a billionaire and you are going to be the one squeezing the other guys, I suppose. And that has been sort of effective, I should say. In many times you have asked me, so what do you use as a counter argument for some of this sort of, and sometimes complex analysis doesn't have a good bumper sticker sort of slogan, and it's hard to convince somebody that that you shouldn't aim for yourself to be the billionaire, but you should aim for a decent salary and a good job, and that would be better for you and your kids, in the future. It might not be a good bumper sticker, but it's the reality, and a lot of people are willing to sell out for the promise of something, even though the reality ends up being sort of terrible.
What's that old saying? Wish in one hand and do something in the other, and see which one fills up first. There was an old saying, something about that. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. Here with Mateus Vernango, professor of economics at Bucknell University. Make sure you check out his blog, nakedkeynesianism.blogspot.com. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. Now, the polling on the debt ceiling stuff. 60% of people want to see cuts. I'm not entirely opposed to the idea of cutting. I think cutting spending is not a bad idea. All depends on what we're cutting. I think the Biden folks have come out with an idea, a way to reduce the deficit by doing some pretty targeted cuts, like cutting $200 billion to big pharma, cutting $31 billion to the oil and gas industry, cutting $19 billion to the real estate industry, cutting $24 billion to the crypto trading loophole. There are cuts we could make. But
Sure. Don't get me wrong. I'm all for making cuts on those things. But if you ask me overall, do we need to cut overall? I think not. I think that we should cut all of those things and we should spend more on things that we haven't spent. The notion we have health care for the very elderly in this country, but we don't have for kids. We have chips, we have some patchwork, but we don't have health care for everybody. And we should be spending more on that. And that should be public health. It shouldn't be through the private sector. We should be subsidizing heavily, Medicare and Medicaid, and those things should have. I mean, it's a question of civilization, and you may very well say, wait a second, aren't we spending too much? Shouldn't be reasonable to cut overall too, and cut in the particular places that you said, the wealthy corporations, and so on and so forth. Things that we shouldn't be giving money to cryptos. That's a scam. We shouldn't give money to scammers. So that's fair enough. We shouldn't. But on the other hand, so how did we eliminate? So when we were at the end of the Second World War, we spent humongous amounts of money to defeat fascism that, was abroad, not inside. And we defeated fascism. And we did, expand health, gave benefits to housing and education for lots of people. How did we do that? We spend more. But the debt overall came down. Why? Because we spent in things that allowed for higher growth. We gave people money so that they can go and study, and we increased productivity and we produced more. And so even though we're spending more, the amount of that and our ability to pay that debt went down. And that's the solution for this thing. So the solution is cut spending where we shouldn't be spending, but spend stuff that it's intelligent, that we should be spending because it will promote growth and well-being of the population, of working class people in this country. And we haven't done enough of that. So the truth about this is that we have for so long, kept not spending on things that are essential, that we need to spend on certain things. Infrastructure, this. We used to have trains that went every place and they were efficient. And we're lagging behind on those things. And there are many of those things that we need to do in order to bring this economy back to, a reasonable place, not just for the billionaires, but for everybody. So I am somewhat against the idea of negotiating on the basis of cutting. We're not going to agree with them on the cutting because they're going to say this is pure political. So they're not, you're concerned with where we're spending money. You're honestly concerned on where we should spend money. These people are not, McCarthy and Republicans, I'm sorry to say, they're not honestly concerned on where we should spend. They don't have a plan. If they were concerned, they would have a plan. They don't have a plan. There's no plan. The plan is not to have a plan. The plan is to, create a crisis and bring Biden down. So Biden should go ahead with no agreement with them. He should cut spending where we shouldn't have, and he should spend more where we can, and he should say, I want to continue spending, go through the 14th Amendment, whatever sort of solution he thinks is the way to solve this. Very important people, Lawrence Tribe, the Harvard professor, has said that he thinks now the 14th Amendment says that the debt ceiling doesn't, it's unconstitutional. So we should go that way and eliminate this forever from the Republican tools of, sort of trying to bring down democracy.
Because the reality is when we get through this crisis, if we get through this without a default, we're going to have to go through this all over again right before the next election.
Yes, we do it every year. So we did it in 2011 and then again in 2013 or whenever it was with Obama. So we had this before, so it's not new. And Obama did negotiate, and we know that they don't negotiate in good faith. So this is not a question of negotiating. I think he has to be tough. I think if he's tough, it strengthens his position in the election next year.
I agree. Last question I've got for you. Let's say that come June 1st, there's no deal. Biden, 14th Amendment, no 14th Amendment. It's going to take some time. On that day, globally, what's the picture look like? How bad could this get?
So if this was Argentina, catastrophe. So Argentina is on the verge of that. So what happens with a country that defaults? People run away from the bonds from the country. So the currency depreciates significantly because the depreciation is large. You'll have a lot of inflation. So Argentina already, before even that, we have 100% inflation. and the credit of the country goes really to hell. So you get into a recession, lots of inflation, a disaster. U.S. that won't happen. For the simple reason that uh, let's say that we're going to be downgraded. So Fitch, Moody's, Standard and Poor's, the three rating agencies will downgrade probably, or at least some of them will downgrade the U.S. That they did that. Standard and Poor's did that in 2011. So that might happen, and that means that you can buy government debt at a lower price. It's downgraded. It's not junk, but it's lower graded than very secure debt. I'll say, if I was an advisor to Goldman Sachs, and I'm not, I would say buy American debt. So why? Because it's secure. What, the U.S. government is broken? We know it's not. Who is the crazy person that thinks that the U.S. is broken? We know it's just political. So I would buy American debt. So I think in the American case, it might be that reasonable people, rational agents would buy American debt because they know that this will eventually be resolved, because there is no reason for the U.S. to default, and actually it will make things better. It did happen in 2008. Lehman Brothers went broke, financial crisis in the U.S. So in any other country, you have a financial crisis, everybody runs for the exit. And everybody in the world bought American bonds. Why? Because they knew that the U.S. was safe. And so the U.S. is a peculiar place because it's still the main economy in the world. The large, it's 22%, 23% of global consumption with 4% of the population. It's, the dollar is the global currency. That won't change. And not immediately, not in, a few decades, even if everything goes wrong. And so, the crisis is clearly political. I think markets are, they will have volatility. There will be sort of problems. They might even throw the economy into recession if Biden cannot, a mild recession. I wouldn't say it's a huge recession, but a mild recession could happen. So nothing of that is good, but it's not a catastrophe. So I've been saying this. I'm afraid of people saying this is the end of the world, is Armageddon. The word Armageddon was used by the Wall Street Journal. It's not Armageddon. It's a crisis. It's a manufactured crisis. It's a political crisis, and that's what they want. And that's the point of this. Yeah. It's a manufactured crisis that they want to happen. It's not the end of the world. We will survive that. The question is how well Biden will politically survive this. So I hope he has the courage to confront them.
I'm right there with you. Mateus, I appreciate the time. As always, great insight and information. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Our good friend Mateus Vernengo. Make sure you check out his blog, nakedkeynesianism.blogspot.com. We'll get links out on social media. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the good socialist president, Dwight David Eisenhower, in an open letter to America's students, he published this while he was the president of Columbia University. He said, "Never let yourself be persuaded that any one great man, any one leader is necessary to the salvation of America. When America consists of one leader and 158 million followers, it will no longer be America." And this is one of those things where you go, wow, Ike was not wrong. The good social. Now, again, Ike wasn't he was probably the only middle of the road president. He wasn't sure if he was going to run as a Democrat or a Republican. He eventually was a Republican, and that went that way. But he was a get it done kind of guy. My favorite quote of him is his all time is the one where he wrote in a letter to his brother Edgar, where he said, if anybody would come out against unemployment or Social Security or unemployment or the Farm Bill, they'd never be heard from in our political history. There are a few Texas oil millionaires and business people, Howard Hunt among them, but their numbers are negligible and they are stupid. And the reason I love that quote is because if you now fast forward, all these years later, stupid is running the Republican Party and sadly the country. And look at where we are. Can you imagine this happening during the Eisenhower era? Can you imagine a Republican Party like that back then going, we're going to deliberately cause a recession. We're going to deliberately cause misery for millions of people. Can you imagine what people of that era? And now we've got a former president who's saying, screw him, default. And the only reason I didn't say default it's because when I was president, I didn't want it to happen. It's one of those things that just go mind-blowing, but not surprising. And look, we're in this moment where the only reasonable response you can come up with Republicans doing what they're doing right now is to cause a recession. They know the only way they can win the Senate and the White House in 2024 and hold on to the House after doing nothing is by causing pain and an ugly recession. They know that's the only way forward for them. Because they know, as James Carville said back in the 90s, it's the economy, stupid. So if we've got a recession, whoever's in the desk where the buck stops, they're the ones going to be blamed. And this is where Biden should have been, I think, more proactive. I think I would have gone this 14th Amendment route a while ago to give chance for something else. And a chance to do the political of what you're going to need to do. But at some point, we got to stop this. We have got to stop allowing either party, and it's been the Republicans mostly over the last several years, but we got to stop any party from using this debt ceiling as a hostage tool. It's ridiculous. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1969. That was the day that began the first strike of the Chicago Teachers Union. The strike lasted 3 days, but it won teachers a $100 per month pay raise. The school board also agreed to hire 750 more teachers to help ease the overcrowded classrooms that plagued many Chicago public schools. Some of the most important victories of the strike came for black teachers. Prior to the strike, many black educators in the city could not find full-time positions. Instead, they were relegated to a permanent substitute status. In order to teach full-time, the teachers had to pass an exam. The exam included an oral portion. Often the testers would fail black teachers who had moved to Chicago from the South. They called these teachers' Southern accents unprofessional. The oral exam became a way to bar black teachers from advancing to full-time status. In the years before the strike, black educators were organizing around this issue. They also demanded changes to the school's curriculum to better include black history and literature. These black teachers did not gain much support, even from their own union. They began to organize sickouts to demonstrate their commitment to these changes. One result of the strike was an end to the discriminatory exam process. After the strike, the school board agreed to include more African American content in the curriculum. The teacher strike had shown the power of the union. Over the next 20 years, CTU would stage 9 more work actions. Some lasted only 2 days. The longest was 19 days long. In 2002, the Chicago Teachers Union again went out on strike, recalling their historic fighting spirit. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
It's an odd marketing strategy for an industry to assail its own customers. Yet, that's what the monopolistic meatpacking industry, led by such huge conglomerates as Tyson, Smithfield, JBS, and Hormel, that control nearly 70% of America's pork market, is doing. Just shut up and eat your bacon, the industry shrieks. The target of their corporate tantrum is the growing grassroots movement of consumers, animal rights advocates, farmers, and others who are dismayed and disgusted by big pork's profiteering on animal cruelty. None of your business, shout the executives, lobbyists, lawyers, and far-right politicians who run the torturous system. But gutsy groups like the Humane Society made their way inside the industry's animal factories, videoing such mass horrors as thousands of pregnant sows locked for 16 weeks at a time in gestation crates so small the animals can't even turn around. In 2018, such exposés prompted 60% of California voters to approve a ballot initiative outlawing the use of these inhumane crates. Adding plutocratic stupidity to their greed, the pork barons then sued the people for overreaching their power. Yes, the pork profiteers actually asserted that democracy, i.e. people power, must not interfere with, quote, sound business practices. Never mind that few of us uncorporatized commoners consider animal suffering to be a sound practice. Even the corporate coddling Supreme Court gagged at the industry's claim that it has the sovereign power to dictate what type of pork chops are available to the public. This month, in an odd-fellow 5-4 decision rendered by 2 progressive judges and 3 corporatists, the court ruled that policy choices like these usually belong to the people. Well, yes, and to the animals. This is Jim Hightower saying, here's an example of how grassroots activism matters in important ways. To stay involved, go to humanesociety.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Ohio Senator J.D. Vance tweeted out, letting in too many people drives up housing costs for normal Americans. Stop Biden's border crisis and stop his war on home affordability. And he points out that that rent increases since 1999 rents have gone up 135%. Income growth 76%. So massive difference between the amount of money people are making and they're paying out in rent. According to JD, it's all the illegals coming in and buying up and renting all of the high priced housing. Yeah. Okay, JD. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, and welcome back to the States. I've asked our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney to come share some thoughts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you, Rick.
So, welcome home. Good trip?
Yes, it was absolutely excellent. I must say, the Indians have handled inflation.
And how did they do that?
Don't buy things. I was amazed. Of course, the average Indian, makes $210 a month. I mean, it's a country that has obviously a portion of the population on extremely low wages, and then again, people are growing in the population, and they've done a decent job going up the ladder. But I said, how is this and that? And they just sort of, the Indians are really kind of frugal people if they need to be. And, of course, they're used to living, a lot of people in a small space, and families live together. If this were India, my kids and my grandkids and I would be all in this, the same house. I would be probably visiting you and Carol every other weekend if that happened.
No, you're always
love
welcome.
My grandkids. Yeah, love my grandkids. But so anyway, in all seriousness, they just, certain times they just don't buy certain things. And because, the view of a lot of my friends is that, it's corporate manipulation too.
Yeah. No, this was my
prices
argument with
go
the
high,
eggs.
then the prices don't go low.
Right. This was my argument when the eggs were $9 a dozen, and people were freaking out, going, just don't buy them. Well, we have to buy them. No, you don't.
No, you don't.
And now that they're, what cracks me up is everyone blamed Biden for that. It's all Biden's fault. Biden, $9, all Biden's fault. Now they're a buck a dozen, not a peep.
Well, let's go back to COVID and toilet paper, right?
Yeah.
It was flying off the shelves. You couldn't get it, and of course, it would continue to be that way. Prices jump up, scarcity. Gasoline's the same way, and I think that the corporations know that. I was talking to, as you know, I flip houses. I was talking to some fellow flippers, and we were talking just yesterday, and I said, look, the prices went up, and you walk in, well, that price is high because of the supply chain. Well, if you really look at it, all right, and the lumber went up to, $12 a piece, and it went from 4 to, 12, and now it's 10. Wow, isn't that great? Why is it 10? Yeah, there's certain things going on in the market.
Yeah. No, I mean, the thing is as I said, you brought up the toilet paper. The reason toilet paper was so expensive is it was scarce. You would go to the store, it wasn't there. We were missing toilet paper, whole aisles full of nothing. I understand that, but when I went to the store to buy eggs, there didn't seem to be a shortage of eggs. They were all there. There were lots of them there. I mean,
You're
that's the thing.
Pay a lot more.
I'm just being gouged. And surprisingly, 60 Minutes. Did you watch the 60 Minutes bit yesterday?
No, I didn't see it.
Yeah, on the Pentagon gouging the taxpayers?
No, I mean, I heard about it, but I didn't see it. And because that fit into one of the shows that I do. They asked me about, defense, and I said it can sustain cuts without hurting strength. And they said, what do you mean? And I had talked to them about this, and then this was before 60 Minutes. And then 60 Minutes came up, and they were talking about it, and I looked at the clips, and, living proof. It's incredible. There are areas that, you can go in and not necessarily cut it. Let's not use the word cut. Fix it, tweak it.
Correct it. Look, I mean, the one guy who was a negotiator said, look, we negotiate in 12 to 15% profit, which is a healthy profit. He said right now they're making about 40% profit. Gee, I wonder when Raytheon back in December said they were going to buy $6.5 billion in their stocks back, where did that money come from? Oh, yeah, us.
Well, the price of vaccines. Who was it? After everything calmed down, they were one of the pharmaceuticals was going to have it up at like $100 or something, and they were subsidized by the United States government all that time, and then all of a sudden, and they made profit on that, and then all of a sudden they were going to raise it. The fact that this country allowed that, what was that lunatic's name? That young kid that bought
Martin,
AIDS medication.
Yeah, Martin something with an S.
And so we have a country where you're allowed to purchase something that's $2 or $3 and make it $600 through a hedge fund.
Yep.
Yeah, this is incredible. It just shouldn't be. So yes, part of it is inflation, and part of it is the supply chain, but part of it too is that the companies know our buying mentality. They know our mentality, period, and they use it.
Now, as I said from the beginning, good old-fashioned American greed. That's the majority of our problem right now. At least that's my view. We brought up the Pentagon. Did you see the explosion today? The explosion that didn't happen in real life, but there was an AI-generated image that caused the market to take a little tank for a minute. Did you see that?
Right. And at first, of course, the reports I had from friends is that actually happened.
So my question is as AI gets more realistic, as deep fakes get much more realistic, how much of this do we have to endure? And at a certain point, do we ignore? Do we become desensitized to it, ignore it, so that if something really does happen, we're kind of out on a ledge? Any thoughts?
Well, I think we are already to that point. I have been screaming about AI for a long time. When I was in Congress, I used to talk about the obsession of the United States government. I'm going to make that a big plural government. The obsession of the United States government for AI. Now, you can imagine why parts of the government were obsessed with AI. Robots for war, you know? Sure. And then the companies that promote the sale and creation of those items, for warfare. Well, I had a friend of mine who, I was posting some things to them, and they said, this is against conservatism. This is against free America, free market, free choices. This isn't free choices. This is boiling down already to where a fake AI image generated a bump in the stock market. What's going to happen during the election when you have a Biden or a Trump that says something and it just goes like wildfire, and we don't know right away that it's not them. It's generated AI.
And look,
this horse is already running down the road.
Yeah, I don't know how we deal with that. I mean, I don't know how in this society of hyper reactionaries who are just looking to score points, or my team's going to win. I don't know in the red hat, blue hat world. I don't know how we do this.
I don't know, but it's right now it's just out there, and you can do what you please. And I worry internally too what the government's doing, in the sense of who's looking at it. And this brings, because my friends have laughed at me, but this brings shades of the Terminator. You've got who in the Congress, in the government, knows exactly what agencies are doing or not doing with AI. Who knows? Is there any internal regulation? Those are questions that need to be asked. And the answer can't be, well, in the interest of national security, we can't tell you, because that's the standard answer, in the interest of national security, which usually means hold on, because you're in for a bumpy ride.
So as a former legislator, is it too late? I mean, have we allowed this to go on for far too long? I mean, not just here in the U.S., but as a globe, has this gone too far out of hand?
Yes, I think it has. And all of a sudden, if you notice, when did this whole AI deal kick in? I mean, in the last 90 days, you saw more sponsored items on Facebook. The guy with the green face, sometimes they made it look like Morgan Freeman because of his voice, and they're talking to you. I can write any topic you want me to write on. And then they can generate letters if you say, I want to see The Last Supper, if everybody was dressed in 1980 clothes. I mean, this is everywhere. Yeah. And it really, like in the last 90 days, it's sort of like somebody's behind a great big promotion campaign of it, or people are behind it. And I just think that, the world needs to begin to talk about which direction we go. I mean, you need also people who have the creative and intellect and scientific ability to talk about this. I mean, I'm sure there's things there that we don't even think about, that somebody that's in this field can say, hey, by the way, did you think about this? You better take a look at it.
Yeah. No, I mean, you've got a CEO of one of the companies going, hey, maybe you should regulate us. Yeah, I think maybe there's a problem there. But,
exactly.
But I saw this Reuters story today that Israel plans on being the AI superpower of the world because of their technological prowess. And you go, is this going to be what rebalances power? Will our missiles and our tanks and all that stuff, will that be meaningless when you're talking about the future of information, the future of communication, the future of this AI stuff? Is that a problem?
Right. I mean, in Jerusalem today, it said Israel aims to parlay its technological prowess to become the artificial intelligence superpower, like you said. And who is this? this isn't the prime minister. This is the defense ministry, defense, you know, world order defense. I know there's all these conspiracy theories, but why is it the defense ministries? Why is it that in America the Defense Department talks about this? And they were talking in Israel about advances in autonomous warfare, and streamline combat decision making. Now, what does that mean? Those two computers, we've taught them to talk to each other. They're going to make the decision who's going to get hit or who's not going to get hit. And of course, one day those computers might talk to each other literally and say, those little people that breathe and have that heartbeat, they're not good for us.
Yeah, I mean,
let's hack into some of these nuclear codes.
This is all those bad '80s movies.
Yes, it is
coming to reality. I mean, when I was reading it, I was going. I remember as a kid reading this stuff, going, "Wow, what a world that would be." Going, maybe it's not such a great idea.
Right.
This is one of those things. It's like I say about 1984, the Orwell classic. There's two ways of looking at that. That's a cautionary tale of, hey, don't let that happen, or it's a, hey, this is a pretty good playbook. But is the same thing on the AI front. Become a Luddite and start smashing the machines, or we're sadly going to head.
Well, this is, Arnold can't run for governor again, but that old expression, "all be Bach," from the Terminator movie is not far off.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Let there be
and
fun.
Somebody's got to talk about it. You're right, though. You have a CEO warning us. That tells you something.
Yeah, that doesn't happen often.
No, it doesn't.
Finally, I want to get your thoughts, because you say that Trump isn't going to go to jail for the documents, but Ty Cobb, one of Trump's former attorneys, he's predicting Trump's going to do time, because evidently the information that we're finding out is that Trump was warned numerous times and counseled numerous times over the span of the year that he was holding on to stuff. And this former attorney for Trump saying, hey, he's going to go to jail. Do you agree or disagree?
I disagree for several reasons. One, I don't believe that the Department of Justice is going to pull the trigger on this, legally. I just don't believe they're going to do it in the end. And part of it is the problem, and I know it's a different deal of, how many documents Biden had and the cooperation or not, et cetera, and Pence had documents, but it's a factor. And nobody can tell me that in justice they aren't sitting there thinking, well, he had documents, he had more, he had some in his garage. I mean, they're having these discussions. I just think they're not going to go after Trump on that. The other thing is, this will be, and I've read about, the lawyers, of course, but this will be a game of one lawyer said this, the other's lawyer said that, and then there's the little poison pill that comes out of, so somebody advised the lawyers, or, somebody within the document system. So I just think it's so twisted and convoluted at this point. I just don't think he will do any time for this whole thing.
Well, we will see how it plays out. But it's interesting that one of his lawyers saying he's going to go to jail.
Oh, yeah. It is.
We
surely
will see.
Is.
But, Bob, I appreciate the time. Welcome back. Look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Okay. Thank you, Rick.
Our good friend, Bob Ney. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this to wrap things up. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1895. Labor organizer Eugene V. Debs began a 6-month prison sentence in Woodstock, Illinois. Debs was the leader of the American Railway Union that had led a nationwide boycott and strike against the Pullman Palace Car Company in 1894. Federal troops had brutally crushed the strikes. But bullets and bayonets were not the only federal weapon. On July 2nd, 1894, a federal circuit court in Illinois issued an injunction against Debs and other labor leaders. The stated basis of the injunction was that the boycott interfered with the delivery of the U.S. mail. The injunction prohibited Debs from doing anything to encourage participation in the boycott. The New York Times recognized that the broadness of the injunction made it a Gatling gun on paper. It was aimed to cut down the power of the workers' union. Injunctions would remain a powerful anti-union tool for the next 4 decades, until laws were passed limiting their power. Debs was found to be in contempt of court for violating the order. He appealed the decision, and the case went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. Among Debs' defense team was a young lawyer named Clarence Darrow. Darrow would go on to become a legal champion for working people. The Supreme Court upheld the legality of the injunction, and Eugene Debs reported to prison. While serving his sentence, he spent much of his time reading. It began his political transformation and caused Debs to begin to question the capitalist system that seemed rigged against working people who dared to try and stand up in solidarity. Soon after prison, he became a socialist, running for president 4 times. In November, Debs finished his sentence and returned to Chicago to a crowd of thousands of cheering friends, supporters, and workers. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Got something to look forward to this week. As a Pennsylvania resident, everyone else indulge me, but State Senator Doug Mastriano says this could be announcement week. He is teasing what he is saying is crazy good news that he may run for Senate. Oh, please. This is one of those things where I'm going, oh, please. There was nothing better than watching Mastriano go down in flames. I mean, he was even worse than the last crazy Republican that ran for governor, Scott Wagner, who literally threatened the incumbent governor to stomp on his face with golf spikes because, the governor put up a billboard, was calling him out. Gonna step on your face. That has got to be, it's one of those things where you go, got to be one of the weirdest comments. One of the weirdest comments that I've ever heard a politician come up with. Just one of the weirdest things that someone's ever. I gotta play. Actually, I gotta play it. It's just one of those things where I gotta. This is a guy running for governor here in Pennsylvania. His name was Scott Wagner. He was a state senator. He had resigned as a state senator, ran for governor. This is him on the side of the road under a billboard, fuming mad that someone had said something about him. But this is Scott Wagner.
Well, Governor Wolf, let me tell you, between now and November 6th, you better put a catcher's mask on your face, because I'm going to stomp all over your face with golf spikes, because I'm going to win this for the state of Pennsylvania, and we're throwing you out of office, because you know what? I'm sick and tired of your negative ads.
I'm tired of you saying bad things about me. So I'm going to assault you with my golf spikes. Now, you thought that was bad? Mastriano, so much worse. And actually got beaten by a whole lot more. So please run for Senate. Oh, please, by all means, because we need to. I can't imagine a crazy person as a senator from my state. Just a thought. Now this AI stuff, I've been talking about this for a while. I don't know what the future is going to be for us. Some of the deep fakes I've seen. Wow. Remember not too long ago, and this is my problem. My problem is when something goes out, it goes viral, everyone grabs a hold of it. undoing the damage that it did is darn near impossible. I've talked to a couple of people here recently. I go, hey, did you hear about that story in New York where they're bringing in the illegals and they're kicking the veterans out of the hotels? And they're, yeah, that's horrible. I can't believe that's going on. They all heard it. It never happened. It was staged. It was a lie. And it got picked up in place after place after place. And, it was just one of those things that because of social media, now there's a part of me that goes, maybe this is a moment where we all collectively go, everything you see on social media is BS. Maybe there's a moment where you go, Twitter at one point had a verification system where, when you had your blue check mark, you had a code of conduct. You had to follow some rules or you could lose it. Like you couldn't spread propaganda. You couldn't spread, this kind of absolutely false information, or they would take your coveted blue check. Now for $8, any idiot with one follower can be verified, which is completely done away with the value of it. There's no social media that you go, oh yeah, that's a verified source now. All the verifications come with some kind of a payout or some kind of a monetary part of this where you go, I'm sorry. The people who are spending this money to get this kind of attention, I don't know that I'm buying into. And especially the viral stuff. I mean, it used to be what I said of Twitter back in 2011. While we were in Wisconsin sleeping on the Capitol floor, I would joke, thank you, CNN, for telling me what's on Twitter. Because the people who were on the ground were tweeting what was happening in those moments. They were taking videos of what was going on inside the Capitol. There was some citizen journalism going on. And there were people who came out of that with integrity. And, it wasn't about getting attention. It was about, getting out the story. That is now morphed into, a little over a decade later, into it's all about the attention. It's all about the clicks and the views and how much they can monetize it. So my concern